At ICANN last week, governments seem to be losing patience about the lack of progress on data accuracy. I can see that you've got a large pile of documents in front of you. You are a recovering lawyer. Are you going to just read all this out to us now in your best Shakespearean voice?
I was thinking about it. How long have we got? A couple of hours?
Well, it's a podcast, so we can take as long as we like. What do you think, Kieran? Should we vote on this? Should Emily just read out this ICANN document?
I think the most pertinent parts would be good.
Okay, a summary. So this started because I was like, I should really report back on what happened at ICANN. And then, anybody who actually went to the ICANN meeting and you ask them what happened, they go, I don't know. I did my presentation and I talked to some
Can you
people.
just remind me all the... I always need reminding of what ICANN is there to do, because as an outsider, and I do think of myself as an outsider because I'm not part of those inner circles in ICANN.
You're not a philosopher king, Lucian.
No, I'm not a philosopher king, so maybe
you
that's...
don't belong.
But I just still don't know after 20 years what ICANN does or what its purpose is.
Ooh. Kieran, what does ICANN do? What's its purpose? You used to work for ICANN. Why don't you give us the pattern? Give us the line. Come on.
The line, it oversees the Internet's domain name system and numbering systems and helps produce policies that are adopted worldwide that maintain a global interoperable Internet.
Oh, well done.
Actually, that's pretty good, Kieran.
Good.
Yeah, I'm just going to... Well, Kieran was a communication specialist, so that's pretty good. But I keep forgetting that. I don't know why.
Yeah, and I think...
Because they run these events, really. They're event managers, aren't they, that run these great big
I think they would call them meetings of the multi-stakeholder community, which is how ICANN makes that policy to keep the Internet...
but back on their meetings, I mean, I went to Brazil and went to one of their meetings, and they had a sort of backstage area that was like a Metallica concert. They had big sofas in the background for the sort of high-ups there, and it was a sort of this great big area.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, and partly because ICANN does a lot of, a contemporary transcribing of all of the meetings. There are many, many meetings going on at the same time in parallel. So the sheer volume of stuff that's going on, and you'll go into a room and it's like an incredibly intense conversation about something, and then you go, oh my goodness, that's far too much, I have no idea what's going on. Go into another room and there's another incredibly intense conversation. All of that is broadcast, all of that is, there's remote participation, and actually ICANN was years ahead in terms of managing remote meetings, but that takes a lot. So you do go backstage and you're like, blimey, so many screens, so many people, so many things going on. So
this week, they've been talking, they have lots of subgroups, don't they? They say it's multi-stakeholder, and from my understanding it's not really, is it? Because there are just different factions that meet as different subgroups, and so it's not multi-stakeholder, is it? You've got sort of what are called the contracted parties who meet as one group, and then the government representatives that meet as another group. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the ICANN structure is typical of what happens when you get engineers to design a governance structure. Is incredibly engineered.
If you've got a government...
So you get people sitting in their silos. So you've got governments who advise, you've got other advisory committees include the numbering authorities. You also have an advisory committee for end users, the at-large group.
So basically,
and
you
then
go
you've
there.
You've got the actual engine that makes policy, which is called the Generic Names Support Organisation, the GNSO, which itself breaks out into several subgroups, which are called stakeholder groups. So you've got the registries and registrars on one side. They have actual weighted voting when something comes through to the GNSO Council, still following. Then on the other side, you've got people like businesses, IP
to be honest. But
you've got the ISPs, you've got
I'm getting one picture
groups.
from this, Kieran. None of this sounds multi-stakeholder at all. It's multi-groups of factions.
Well, all the stakeholders are there. It's a perfectly engineered product that forgot to include the human aspect of humans.
But they're all there.
So-
They're all there. Surely, like government is there, where the Labour are on one side and the Conservatives are on the other side, and the Lib Dems. So they're all there, but they're all actually meeting each other themselves in their own subgroup. Surely,
Correct.
That's right. One of the most persistent things when people talk about improving it is to break down the silos, and yet there's very little effort ever made really to break down the silos because they're stuck in their rooms. And then they send one another missives.
So
Emily,
I mean, you've
it's
been talking about some new things that are happening to try and presumably break down those silos and include more people in those silos.
Yeah, I kind of came back to the governments in ICANN when I was thinking, how do I report on what happened? And the GAC, as it's known, the Governmental Advisory Committee, is one of the only groups that, during the meeting itself, organises a note, a communique that they all agree to. So it's actually a very good record of the things that are going on.
Give us a couple of the headlines.
So I think the thing that really came through to me is, their concerns about what is called in the ICANN world DNS abuse, which we would call cybercrime, scams, fraud, that sort of stuff. So I would say a sense of frustration about lack of progress. When you have governments saying things like, the GAC reiterates that the issue of urgent requests for domain name registration data remains a high priority, you quake because that, in government speak, that is like they are reaching boiling point, the pressure cooker's about to explode and something bad is going to happen.
And Kieran, I mean, I just remember these sort of discussions when I was first going to ICANN just to understand how it all worked over a decade ago. This is still a pressing matter.
Yes, it is one of the big problems with the ICANN structure right now. It is incredible. In fact, it's slower than the ITU, which is what everybody used to complain about. Which we can talk for a long time about why that is. But fundamentally, when it comes to this issue, it's because the registrars don't want to do it. And so the way that the system works is if someone can consistently stick a sort of something in the spoke of the wheel, stick a stick in the spoke, and which they've been doing non-stop for a decade. But it's got to the point now on this issue where legislation's being passed, where the governments have had enough, and they've tried in this system, this multi-stakeholder system, and now they're saying, right, that's it, let's pass some laws. And then it probably sounds silly to people that don't spend much time in diplomatic worlds, but reiterates is never good. That means the governments have made it clear, and now they're really making it clear. So there'll need to be some action on this, or it'll blow up.
And when we say that it's going to blow up, Emily, that means regulation, doesn't it? It means the sort of NIS2, GDPR compliance, all of these things that are very disruptive in this industry.
They are. I mean, I was actually reading a speech. I want to get Eleanor Dews on this podcast.
Who's she?
She's a lawyer who was actually the UK's lead negotiator for the General Data Protection Regulation back in the day. So she really
into shutting down the data and shutting down the sharing.
She really isn't. She's been surprised at how it's been used for that.
That was a rhetorical question because I have met her and she is very...
One of the things she said in her speech is that there are 115 bits of legislation in the EU on digital issues. That's thousands and thousands of pages. And there's actually a rush to pass more legislation quickly in the EU on digital because they're worried about right-wing people being elected into the European Parliament and at the national level who would stop the train. But that leads to a whole amount of complexity. For us, in the domain name sector, we're all thinking about NIS2, which is generally about information security, but has some bits related to the domain name. And you can actually track the progress. The European Commission had a representative on one of these never-ending expedited policy processes that was supposed to sort out access for law enforcement and others to registration data. That ended, as all of the others do, in a stalemate, and they obviously just left that room and went and put some clauses into NIS2. So it's not a question of, like, do we want this? It's happening already.
OK, give us one more highlight from the report.
So one more highlight from the report is that they're welcoming the changes to contracts, which mean that registries and registrars have to react quicker and mitigate abuse. We've actually been tracking that, and Mark Robertshaw went and presented some early findings. What we're seeing is that actually at the moment 90% of abuse domains flagged for abuse that we see in our system do not get mitigated in what we're looking at the moment.
That's 90.
90. Of the ones that are mitigated, it's taking on average 3.48 days against a contractual commitment to respond within 24 hours. Now, we think we're missing a lot of the mitigation action, so our next stage is going to be to add some more in.
But on the face of it, 90%, when you go and look at the website, the structure or the domain name and look at changes that may or may not have been made, nothing has changed.
We're looking at a narrow set of mitigation steps, but what the governments are saying in ICANN at the same time is great to have the contract changes. ICANN, it would be really good if you measured the impact here. So that's something that we're trying to do in our way. But it's surprisingly difficult because actually there's no one way of showing that you have mitigated DNS abuse.